Okay. Thank you for that reminder. Boy, you're good. And so anyway, starting July 26th, statewide 4-chapter meeting. And we have an agenda which includes a welcome, and I'll get to in a minute. We're going to talk about CCL just briefly to remind ourselves what we are about. And of course, we have our guest speaker, Council Chair Heather Kimball, with us already. It's wonderful, Heather, thank you. And then we'll try to look at Hawaii and national highlights and some climate action, and we'll have room for Q&A. So right off the bat, what I'd like to do before we get into the content is develop a little connection among ourselves. And one of the little fun exercises that you might want to do. Hi, Jamin. Hi, Anna. Hi, Susan. Oh, and Tamara's here. Oh, man. Hi, Tamara. And Roberta's here under the name of
Ron
Riley. Yeah. Well, we're both here. Well, that's good.
So that's how Ron is able to get a whole bunch of stuff done. He's got this.
I want to do that.
So anyway, if you would like to, in the chat, just think of what was the most fun thing you got to do this summer so far. And it's a good exercise because sometimes we can get caught up in gloom and doom and forget that we're actually having fun along the way. So in the chat there, just type your heads off and then we'll read them. And I'm going to be quiet so that you can think.
What a diversity of activity.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me read some that are there. Going back, we have Becky, most fun so far. A friend's birthday party at Honolulu Beach Park. Ah, Honolulu, great. Was the surf up, Becky? Yeah, good. Okay.
Somewhat. I'm not a surfer, so I enjoyed watching everybody.
All right. And Molly went to a bluegrass festival with friends and family, jammed into the wee hours. We know Molly is an acoustic bass player, right, Molly? So way to go.
Yeah, a very basic bass player.
A basic bass player.
That's all you need for bluegrass. So
okay.
Works.
And getting Oscar passed. Wow. Spending time with relatives. John run half a marathon, having family here for a month, Virginia, and whitewater kayaking. Tamara, again, back in the water. All right, Tamara. Plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 competent. Yeah, we know that. And family trip through Utah, the North Rim of the Grand Canyon. Paul Bernstein, fabulous. Tabling with Keith at the community fair. Boy, I bet that was fun. And then let's see, who did I miss? road biking in Montana. Doug, wow, we're all Alberta, 400 miles. That's great. Were you camping or moteling, Doug?
Schmotel
Smoke-
around the Glacier National Park and Waterton National Park.
All right. And then this guy, Ron Riley, my fun thing, discovering a fabulous nature trail at the 21-mile marker of the Dan Inouye Saddle Road. If you haven't checked that out and you're on the Big Island, remember 21-mile marker. There's a little pull-off parking and restrooms. And one of the things that I might add, I don't have to, but I could add, it's excellent for anyone who's doing cardiac rehab. It's an hour-long trail with elevation changes. And I happen to know that not because I'm a medical person, but because I'm actually going through cardiac rehab. So visited Kauai, the Hindu temple. Friends from Kauai and New Mexico. Okay. And every time I swim in the ocean, it's a famous time. And then Doug says 400 miles when the Canadian National Carbon Tax went into effect. So, and here's the honor of us all, the one and only from Washington, D.C. is Mr. Dave Chun, who joined us, accompanied by Ruta Jordans from Kauai and Ashley Boggs. Boy, this is great to see you all. And Dave and Ruta, and Ashley, we were just putting in what was the most fun thing that we have done this summer. And so go ahead. That's great. Everybody's having a lot of fun. So Noel. Okay, somebody else. Helping build an art car for Burning Man. Wow, Ashley. Was there a lot of people there? You're muted.
No, just a couple of friends. One of our friends decided to build one this year, and we all doubted him, but it's coming together. So,
All right. And then I think Dave is trying to think of his most fun thing, which may be a bumper crop of something from his garden. I'm just filling in for you, Dave, there. I know you love your garden. Okay, thank you all. Let's share screen, Noel, and see what else comes up. Who are we? One of us is going to speak to that. Keith, maybe. Is Keith here? Keith may not be here. Okay, let me speak to that. Our core values, quickly. We're focused, and a key one is we're optimistic. We foster diversity. We develop relationships. We, to the maximum extent possible, exercise integrity. And we are nonpartisan, which is so crucial in this divided Congress. Nothing gets passed unless it's bipartisan. So we are in a very key position to influence both sides of the aisle, and personal power to guide our engagement work. Thank you, Noel. Oh, then I get to talk again, son of a gun. Our commitment to build the political will for a livable world, and our climate solutions will deliver a livable world if we can get them implemented. And we do this by lobbying Congress at our national conventions twice a year, and monthly with Climate Action Program, where we write or call our member of Congress office. And we talk to neighbor friends, local officials, anybody else who'll give us an ear about a healthy future with an electrified American economy. Thanks, Noel.
I thought you were going to keep going, Ron. You were doing quite well.
No, thank you. I'm running out of voice. You're
Okay.
up, Paul.
Try and save you here. So in terms of CCL's policy agenda, carbon fee and dividend, or what we refer to at the state level, the carbon cashback policy, is still CCL's top priority. So I think everybody knows it's putting a fee on carbon emissions, or essentially fossil fuels, and giving the money back to individuals. But this year, towards the end of last year, in recognition that other policies are needed in addition to carbon fee and dividend to address climate change, CCL has expanded its policy agenda in 3 new areas. And those are the electrification of buildings, so reducing the carbon footprint of existing and new buildings, carbon sequestration, focusing on healthy forests, and clean energy permitting reform, so that we can get move fast to decarbonize our electricity grid.
Thank you, Paul. So we're going to be transitioning now to our guest this evening, our guest speaker, who's going to be talking about Oscar. And this isn't the Grouch. This is a wonderful new office that's been developed here in Hawaii County. And Oscar, well, I'll have Heather define or spell out what Oscar means. But so Heather is our Hawaii County Council Chair. She's a community leader involved in a number of organizations, even before she joined the County Council. Climate action advocate. She's a scientist, expert with GIS. She's taught at UH. She owns a business with her husband. She's a licensed pilot, which every time I read, I'm just so amazed by. Obviously, a climate leader, a mom, and a dear friend. She and others have worked diligently this past many months, maybe a couple of years now, to get this new office in place. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Heather.
Thank you so much, Noel, and it's nice to see a lot of familiar faces and hopefully some new friends I can make across the state today, talking about Oscar. So I do have a slideshow which was actually prepared for another event, so I'm gonna not go through everything in great detail, but there were some diagrams that I wanted to make sure that I shared with you folks. So I'm gonna go to that. Everybody see the slide?
Yes.
All right, great. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about the Office of Sustainability, Climate Equity, and Resilience, affectionately known as Oscar in the county. And this is an auspicious day to talk about Oscar because this photograph was taken about 5 hours ago. This is me and my colleague Rebecca Villegas in the mayor's office for the official signing of Bill 48, making it an official law. And we were both very excited, as well as Mitch, to actually get this officially signed. But let me, before I go into this, I want to start with just a little bit that will lead into a later part of this discussion today that Noel asked me to share with you guys, which is a little bit about how advocacy worked in this case. And I would start by saying that the process of creating Oscar was about a 2-year process, and actually initiated with a conversation that Noel and Tam Hunt and I had about, okay, we have these climate goals at the state level, we have these targets. How do we make sure that the county is actually engaging in the meaningful steps towards those targets, given that we know what we need to do to start to achieve, fossil fuel transition for our transportation, for our energy systems. We have all these wonderful plans. How do we get the county to do with that? And so we started drafting a bill very early stages, and then engaged in what I think is a really important process when it comes to advocacy, which is getting all of your allies and the folks that are not going to be your allies to start weighing in and contributing to this product and co-producing this product. And so as we went through the process of working with other folks and really sitting down and analyzing, okay, what have been the past barriers with respect to actually implementation, getting towards actionable items for the county in terms of addressing climate, sustainability, equity, and resilience. And that's how Oscar came to be. So it came from this idea of how do we make sure that the county is accountable for actions that they have been mandated to achieve by the state, and grew to we need a coordinating authority to actually ensure and support those actions. And so one of the things that Bill 48, the Oscar bill, does is sets definitions for these terms that we commonly use with respect to how we want to address climate change and in general the well-being of our community. And so these terms are thrown around pretty loosely, but we spent some time addressing them. And the first one here, of course, is sustainability. And when we talk about sustainability in the county, we're really talking about that three-part proposition of making sure that there's balance between economic growth, between environmental systems, and general social well-being of our community. And I think it's really important that we've all agreed that decision-making needs to incorporate consideration of these three aspects. We don't have any definition of climate or climate adaptation or climate mitigation. And so Bill 48 actually provided a definition of climate. And, one of the things that I shared with my colleagues is, we are on the front lines of climate change here in Hawaii. We are already experiencing the direct impacts, whether it's drought, it's fire, it's sea level rise, it's coral bleaching. We have warm water coming up from South America this year and the blob coming down from the north. It may be very interesting for the later part of the hurricane season with those two warm bodies of water moving towards us. The picture of the forest fire here, I wanted to share with folks that is the forest fire in Pauilo, which is in my district, which is the rainforest. We are having a fire in a rainforest. That's how much we're already seeing this impact. So it was important to define this term, but I think most people need to understand at a greater depth the level of urgency that is tied to taking action. We also wanted to make sure we defined equity and environmental justice. And, Oscar is the title of Oscar exists is it does because it makes a nice acronym that's memorable, but also because we wanted equity to be included at the same level of importance as these other items, because we want to make sure that everybody is receiving the same benefits, as well as if there are hardships to bear, that's being equally dispersed too. And I often tell the story of why I actually got involved in politics in the first place, which is because I have children, and my oldest daughter was talking with her husband and having the conversation about whether they were going to have kids, and she called me and said, we're really concerned, and we don't know what kind of a world that they might be able to have, what kind of world where our children grow up in. And that was really heartbreaking to me. And she had reached out because she's like, Mom, you're involved in climate science policy, you're involved in this. What do you think? Are we going to be able to turn this around? And I said, I have a lot of confidence in the human capacity to innovate, to make big change, to solve challenging problems, and to adapt. But what I've seen is that we've not all done it equally. There are often some people, and they're often the same people, that are left behind. And that is why anything that I'm pursuing that has to do with sustainability, climate change, and resilience, I want to make sure that equity is a key piece of that puzzle, and that we are making sure that we lift all boats. Environmental justice, of course, ties into the Justice 40 initiative, and I'll get into that a little bit more with the next slide. The Justice 40 initiative is something that came down with the Biden administration. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but a number of the programs that are available right now do have this equity component, this environmental justice component in terms of how that money is expended. And so, you know, by elevating that within our own code and within the Oscar mission, that makes us more eligible for those particular programs from the Biden administration. And the map here shows the areas of Hawaii Island that are currently identified as Justice 40. We are working on redrawing this map because if you are familiar with our communities on this island, you know that some of those areas like Keaukaha, for example, and areas in Kauai and Waikolo, which are not identified as Justice 40, are Justice 40 in terms of the definition of economic justice. We also defined resilience, and I won't go into this in too much detail, but again, we're looking at minimizing the risks and damages and ensuring that we spend money now to make sure we avoid costs in the later on. And you know, one of the things that I think is really important about Oscar and the funding for it, which it has been fully funded too, by the way, is that we expect that those costs that are associated with operating the office will be saved ultimately in avoided costs, because it's a 6-to-1 ratio when you spend money on preparation versus when you have to spend it after a disaster or after an event. You know, we're all familiar with a lot of the challenges that we have in our state around climate change and getting to action. But one of the things that Oscar really focused on was where we are making progress. You know, we are making progress on our renewable energy portfolio. We've really seen a rapid transition to fossil fuel vehicles in the last year, 40% increase. Thank you, Noelle, for this graph. And then, you know, this is actually, this carbon neutrality graph is from my graduate thesis research. On this island, if you balance sequestration with emissions, we're actually at 80% towards neutrality. Now that's great because we have so much land mass, we got a lot of trees, we don't have a lot of industry. When you compare that to City and County of Honolulu, you know, you folks are over at 3%. So we're going to have to look at something across the state that gets us all to carbon neutrality. The other good thing, you know, we have, I put Hokulea on here because to me, Hokulea represents like a resurgence, a rebirth, a new focus on including traditional knowledge and indigenous wisdom into our decision making. And Oscar, in terms of its mission, very clearly states that we will use place-based information. We will include traditional knowledge and traditional frameworks like the Aloha Aina economic futures as part of our decision making when we move forward, including addressing that equity piece. And then finally, you know, we have a lot of folks that are working in this field that are doing excellent work that we need to coordinate, that we need to make sure that everybody's getting together. And I put the Aloha Plus Challenge up there as as an example of one of the many organizations that are working in this space, and you guys too, of course. And so, you know, just going back again to the whole picture of Oscar and identifying where the gaps were between having some really great plans. I've got a couple up here, the climate integrated climate action plan, which just went for its first hearing last week before council. We have the county's hazard mitigation plan, but there are actually several other plans, both at the state and the county level, that we know what to do. Like there's no question about that. We know what we need to do. Now is the challenge is how do we make the action happen? And that's where we got to looking at the collective impact model. So we looked at different models for how do you affect long-lasting and meaningful change. And the collective impact model is based on these 5 components. It's that there needs to be a shared common agenda. There has to be an agreed upon set of metrics and way of measuring performance and success. You have to ensure that the activities that you're engaged in are reinforcing each other and not working at cross purposes. There's a need to make sure that there's continuous communication between stakeholders And then all of this needs to be supported by a backbone organization or somebody that can provide that administrative support. And so this model comes out of Stanford. And if those of any of you that are familiar with Vibrant Hawaii, actually Vibrant Hawaii is designed around the same sort of collective impact model. You're probably wondering why there's a teeny tiny unicorn in the corner. And I use that to remind myself that in addition to just the urgency that you folks are certainly all aware of addressing the climate change situation, there is an unprecedented amount of federal funding available for climate action right now. And I use the unicorn as a symbol of they're unique, they're special, and they probably won't be available again in our lifetime. And so we wanted to create Oscar with the lens that we needed to best position ourselves to create a bucket within the county and the ability and capacity to go after this set of federal funding that may not be available ever again. And so we designed, like I said, we designed Oscar around the collective impact model. One of the things that became clear in all of our negotiations and discussions that the current activities around climate change and sustainability are primarily done by Kendra and Jake. I'm sure you guys know both of them. They are awesome, wonderful people. But you can't move a great big ship such as the county from the smallest department. And we needed to elevate this issue, the Oscar mission and values, to the mayoral, the cabinet level, because a lot of the time, what's important is that somebody is there as an advocate in the room as decisions are happening. And so that's the first part of Oscar, is that it elevates this office to the level of the mayor, and so they will be in the room as cabinet level decisions are being made. We also set the staffing around the collective impact model. So you will have the administrator, which will be involved in community outreach and internal outreach within the county to help develop that shared agenda. You have a communication and education specialist that will ensure that there is that constant communication and that education happening both internally and externally. You have a grants specialist as well as a policy analyst to make sure that we are all engaged in mutually reinforcing activities. We don't want to have situations where the code or statute prevents us from something that Department of Public Works is willing to implement. Case in point, how we procure light duty vehicles in the county, and Noelle and I were just talking about this yesterday about how we need to move forward with adjustments to the procurement process to really enshrine within code the transition from fossil fuel vehicles. And then finally, the entire body of Oscar itself provides that backbone administrative support. So there's a lot of benefits that we're hoping to see from Oscar, but the primary elements are that we're going to have this long-term action focused, implementation focused body that will serve as a central coordinating authority both internally within the county as well as with our stakeholder partners in the community to address the actions that we know we need to take. With that, that is the end of that presentation, and I will figure out how to escape from this and stop sharing. Okay, there we go. So that is in a nutshell about Oscar. Ron, Noelle, I don't know if you want me to take questions on Oscar right now, or if you want me to move a little bit into the conversation about the advocacy process that happened with the development of this bill.
How about if we jump into that, just
Okay.
go into the advocacy piece, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions. And if anyone has any questions at the moment, just feel free to put them in the chat. If we're not able to get to everything, we'll get back to you with a response. Thank you.
Thanks, Noelle. And I hope you haven't been bored by hearing so much of my voice, and I didn't run through that too quickly. But this process, like I said, started with a conversation between Noelle, Tam, and I probably about 2 years ago. And one of the things that I've had to learn in this job is patience. quite a bit of patience. If I could have done this sooner, I certainly would have. But you know, what I think is important in terms of advocacy. Can I get a show of hands of people that are familiar with the 7 habits of highly effective people? Anybody? Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. So we're talking about the upper part of the triangle here, which is think win-win mindset. Seek first to understand, then be understood, and then the synergize piece. And so what I would say in terms of how I've developed various bits of code amendment, these various bills, is I always start with this core idea of what I want to achieve, but how that happens, I leave very flexible. And in this case, I think the main thing that we wanted to achieve is we wanted to see plans implemented. Like, we know what we need to do. How do we get it implemented? And that was the primary objective. So that's the first thing I would say, is just whittle down your primary objective to this core piece. What is that core piece? All right. Don't try to be too definitive about what it looks like. And then I started to think about, okay, who are all the stakeholders? Who do I need to get on board with this? Obviously, planning department, research department, R&D department had to be involved. Finance had to be involved. Our legal team, corporation counsel needed to be involved. The mayor needed to be involved. And so that was the point at which I said, look, this is what I think the challenge is. This is what I think we need to address. What do you think? What should we put into this? And then, those same conversations that I was having internally, I was also having externally with various folks that I knew that were working in the space. What have you seen? What have you observed? And there was this real evolution just by listening, hearing what the various concerns were, that and listening to other people's experience, that, like I said, really evolved the bill from what our initial idea was, which was a set of milestones and a set of mandates, to, oh, we need to actually create this office. We need to have this backbone support that's going to make this thing happen. Because first of all, I will say, people in the county, in all of the departments, were willing to make change, but sometimes they didn't have the technical support or the know-how or the bandwidth or the funding. Like, the willingness was there. So if that, given that was the case, like, a mandate, how's that going to help? They're already willing to do it. We're going to tell them they have to do it, but we're not going to give them any support. So, that's how we saw this bill evolve into the format that it's in. Some other strategies, there was, of course, a lot of concern from R&D that we were usurping their responsibilities from this office. And so part of it was understanding where that concern lied, how we could alleviate those concerns, how we could understand how the two objectives, like I said, think win-win. How could I make a win for R&D? How could I make a win for this office? And actually, we came up with that third alternative that arrives when you synergize ideas. And ultimately, Doug Adams, who is the director of R&D, became one of the biggest supporters. He was first a major detractor, but because we really tried to bring him in as much as possible to help co-develop this with us, at the end, he felt a real sense of ownership about it as well. And the same is true, I would say, for our mayor. If initially he was a bit hesitant about me growing government, tax and spend Democrats, whatever. But I think in this case, I was able to convince him and our finance director that this office is going to pay for itself. And, I was able to, for example, secure a couple of grant opportunities early on that said, hey, look, this is stuff that we can bring in to support this office to back it up. So that just coming in with that mindset of, this is the core thing I want to achieve, being flexible about the mechanisms that ultimately happen. So that's how we got to the bill. And then just finally, I would say, when it came time to start to think about advocacy and support of the council, like, you absolutely need to know, whatever the scenario is. In my case, I've got to convince 5 people to agree with me. 6 people is better, because that's a veto-proof majority. And the best is, of course, unanimous support. And so one of the things, of course, was the decision to bring Councilmember Villegas on board as a co-sponsor. This is some area that's super important to her. She does have information and contacts that could bring additional support, as well as close relationships with other members of the council. And so by bringing her in and having her support the bill too, I kind of brought this whole additional faction into the support for the bill. And so that's, a scenario that I used in this particular case. The other part of this is understanding the audience. And so, the first hearing of the bill, I did my speech on what it was important and a lot of the details and how this is going to work and whatnot, in my sciencey way, like, all the data, here are the facts, blah, blah, blah. And of course we did a major push prior to that with Noelle's help and other folks here on the call. Of course, thank you for writing letters of support. Had some of, I actually think in my time so far on being the council, this bill has had the record in terms of letters of support from the community as far as testimony. So yay, thumbs up to all the folks that submitted testimony. So there was that sort of public outreach part. But part of the feedback that I got after the first hearing was, the facts sound great, but you need to connect this a little bit more on the emotional level. And so I don't know if any of you watched the hearings, but the next hearing, that personal story I told earlier, which is an absolutely true story about my daughter, that's what I led with. Okay, because sometimes you got to lead with the facts, sometimes you got to lead with the heart. But the big part is knowing the audience and who you're trying to influence at the time and what type of message is going to get through to them. So that's another piece of it. And I would say, working in your case, you're trying to influence legislators. So you need to get, intimately familiar with them. What is their love language? What is their priority? And that's the way that you present the information. I'll give just another quick example. Councilmember Leloy is one of my colleagues. I wasn't sure how important the the climate change resilience piece was to her. So there was a whole piece of my presentation that had to do with equity, because I know that's huge for her. And so, understanding what was important to the folks that had to make the decision and honing in on that and speaking to them about what was their issue of import, that was part of what helped get it forward. I did a lot of legwork. I saw some of you at the climate fair, making sure to handing out flyers. I did as much as we could to get it through. At the end of the day, we did have 2 detractors, but one of them we tried to change their mind and we're not successful. The other one we kind of gave up on because we didn't, like I said, I always try to understand what the objections are, and I would have made changes if I could understand them and fix them. But in one of the cases we had no idea, so we just let it be and got our 7 votes and moved on. So I'm happy to take any more questions. That was the process we used with Oscar, and it has been the process that I've used with other pieces of legislation.
Heather, thank you so much. This is so incredible, and I'm pretty sure that we're going to review this over to gather the pointers, right, that we can apply with our advocacy efforts. There are a couple of questions in the chat. Paul asks, how did you coordinate with, or did we bring in the business community in this particular situation? So that would be question 1. Do you have a response to that?
I did actually. One of for this bill and another one I'm sure you're familiar with, the EV bill 120 from last year, we actually did send it out to our chambers of commerce. And one of the things that I can't stress strongly enough is it's always important to bring the people that you think will object to the bill the most to the table the soonest. And that was one of the things with the EV bill. We did expect more pushback from the business sector. Surprisingly, I don't know, perhaps with Oscar, our chambers of commerce were all on board with this right away. Like there was no question that they saw this as meaningful. Perhaps probably because there is a huge economic piece to Oscar. Like I said, there's the avoided cost of preventative measures, addressing climate change early, and then preventative savings. And then there's also all of that federal money that we know we need to develop capacity to bring in. And of course, any of that supports all of the different efforts in the county, whether it be for the community members or businesses. Similarly, there were a number of community groups that were, that we shared this information with as well, just to get feedback and input early on.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And we have just time for one more question because we have the rest of the agenda to go through. But Tom has a question here about what will the primary policy priorities of Oscar be, and that you think will have a better chance of becoming reality as a result of this cabinet level status. So this is like lower level detail about policy priorities.
Right. So the title of the office is sort of an indicator of the policy priorities. So sustainability, climate, equity, and resilience. And there is a follow-up chapter. So Bill 48 created the office, and then it also created a new chapter in Hawaii's code that is dedicated to this subject area. And then we have a follow-up portion of the code that will fill out the actual policy pieces that this office will engage in. At this point, it's pretty high level what's been put into the code, but then we go into detail within each of those areas. And so the administration has currently identified 6 areas as the priority sustainability areas. So it's energy transformation, it is solid waste, smart, sustainable communities, natural resource management. What am I forgetting, Noel? It's late. Green workforce.
Yeah, there's so many, but
yes,
yeah.
I can't remember all the 6 priorities.
The sixth chapter, the next chapter of this will incorporate these details, right? That will then be the purview of the Oscar as far as
and so the format of the bill, it sets a policy statement, and where there are already state mandates, like for example, the state mandate around the cesspool conversion, right? We've actually set intermediate benchmarks, or the fleet transition, we've set intermediate benchmarks. And then when we have identified either through the climate action plan or one of the other plans, concrete steps that can be taken, we've added that. So I would actually refer you to the climate action plan is as the one of the primary documents to look at some of the action items that the office will be responsible for. But initially we're looking at bringing on the administrator and getting the positions filled. Probably a lot of the early phase work will be around transitioning our fleets, and then also dealing with various aspects of energy use within county facilities, and tying that in with some of the carbon pollution reduction grants. So that's internally within the county. We're also looking at various programs and funding sources that we can be a pass-through for helping our citizens actually make those conversions as well. So I think those will be some of the primary activities of the group. Around the equity piece, I really want to highlight Jake, who I mentioned before, Jake Sykes, who works in R&D, has really created a beautiful guiding code around how we do better at being inclusive and equitable, especially including Native Hawaiians in the decision-making process and including traditional knowledge. So that's one of the pieces that I'm actually most excited to see come forward, because it's really eloquent and well done. So I always like to give him props for his work on that particular piece.
Well, Heather, thank you so much. This has been incredible. I know we ran over a little bit here, but I think all the information you share is very relevant to our journey, and with the local session coming up, and also what we're doing at the national level. So, thanks. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, Heather was an early endorser of the ICTA, so the National Carbon Pricing, Carbon Fee and Dividend Bill. So, Heather, we look forward to your endorsement of the other national policies that are coming up. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Appreciate the time.
I know you have to go, so feel free to hang out, hang on here, or you can drop off. I really appreciate your time. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Thanks,
evening.
Thanks. Okay, I am going to share, we're going to kind of run through quickly some of the subsequent slides here. So just quickly, Hawaii updates. Want to do a highlight real quick on leadership. So Tamara is on here as well. So I've handed the baton to Tamara. So Tamara is going to be is once again leading the region. So she's regional coordinator for Greater Pacific Northwest. I've stepped back and I'm focusing primarily on Hawaii as well as our Pacific territory. So you'll see more of me. Also at the national level, Madeline Parra, for those of you who don't know, she shifted into the president role for CCL. And Mark Reynolds has stepped in as, I believe, interim or acting executive director. And there's an active search for an ED at this time. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Paul or Matt, if Matt's here. Quick update on carbon cashback.
I don't think Matt's here. So one of our big state level actions is trying to get carbon cashback through the state legislature. Last year, we were able to get a resolution through the House side, which was quite nice, and kind of tried to leverage that for national action. Anybody who's interested in learning more about the local effort, please, if you can just put your name in the chat. We meet every Monday at 1:30 over Zoom. And then there are 3 task forces that have their own either weekly or bi-weekly meetings. There's a legislative task force, there's a media task force that Virginia leads, and there's an outreach task force. So always looking for more help and more support. So again, if interested, want to learn more, please put your name in the chat, and happy to reach out to you. Thanks, Noel.
Yeah, thanks. Really quick, so Keith, Neil, and I were at the Hilo Community Climate Fair. We did a tabling out there, quite a few organizations related to climate, sustainability, et cetera. So it was a fun time. And one of our friends actually won the raffle for the bike. He's, I think, a CCLer as well. John, do you have, would you like to share quickly updates on what's happened in Kauai? John, if you're saying something, I can't see you. You may be muted. Is John with us?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, thanks, John.
Sorry about that. So we have a group of us that are working to restore a native coastal forest in the Mahalapu area, more specifically at the Makauwahi Cave Reserve. That's something that's taken our focus and our arms, and we look forward to continue that partnership with them. We've been trying to meet with our representatives in preparation for the next session. One of the things that I would just mention is that I think they share a lot of the frustration that we all have who have worked at all with the legislature, in that things seem like they make great progress, and lo and behold, one person seems to be able to just kill it. So at any rate, they, at least the legislators we're working with, Luke Eslin and Nadine Nakamura, I think share that kind of frustration and are trying to develop strategies to get around that. Also, we're just continuing on with our monthly forums, and there's a registration place there if anybody's interested. And I guess I just would mention that as I look at the screen and the number of people that are here from Kauai, I'm quite pleased. There's, I believe, 6 of us. So not bad for the smallest island. That's it.
Thanks, John. And thanks for everyone who joined. Paul.
So quickly, we CCL has its annual conference in June, and part of that, or kind of the culmination of that is descending on Capitol Hill and trying to go to as many offices as possible. So we had a Hawaii contingent. We met with all 4 offices, and like to thank Molly for a heck of a lot of prep work to bring together lobby teams and lobby agendas and what have you. So the picture you see there is we met with Mitch, I want to say Heinrich, but I'm not sure I quite got that right, in Representative Takuta's office. She actually dropped in for about 30 seconds or a minute to say hello before she had to go down to the floor to vote. We met with the other 3, Senator Schatz, Senator Hirono, and Representative Case, mainly to talk about the Energy Innovation Carbon Dividend Act and with the senators, the Prove It Act, which happens to deal with the border carbon adjustment. And you'll hear more about that in a couple slides.
Great, and thanks to everybody who participated. We also had folks joining via Zoom. There's quite a bit of preparation required. So thanks all for making that a successful lobby event. Media, a spotlight.
Hi, that's Virginia with media, and we had a steady stream of letters and editorials printed. We've had 4 since our last meeting. Noel, who is also a partner of Sustainability Partners, had an editorial published in the Honolulu Star Advertiser about the new effort for getting more EV charging infrastructure. Bobby, who's from Maui, had her letter published about the fossil fuel industry and how they should be taking accountability. John Kawamoto had a letter published in response to an editorial that didn't really understand the potential of solar energy, and he did an excellent job explaining the potential. And then Charlie had a letter published in the Honolulu Star Advertiser about how the gas strike actually revealed flaws in the thought that gas should be considered a firm power, that it really isn't firm when it's subject to things like gas strikes. I also wanted to bring to your attention our website, cclhawaii.org, that was put together by Noel, and it has a lot of good information there. I'll put the link to it in the chat, but we have a blog about the climate fairs. We have a blog about the national conference meeting. We put the latest events in there. There's a lot of information in there about the different policy areas. And we also put in calls to action when the legislature is in session. So I hope you'll all have a chance to check out the website often. Thank you.
Thanks, Virginia. And also, there's a great opportunity for anybody who would like to contribute to LTEs and op-eds to participate with us. You have the opportunity to contribute to some letter that's being written by somebody else and be a co-author, or even just take ownership of an article that was written by somebody. We have ghostwriters involved with our team as well. Just really quick, social media is another angle that we're ramping up on. We want to reach people where they're at, and there are quite a few people on social media channels, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. If Threads becomes a thing, we'll be there as well. Here's a sample of I think this was a Facebook post. So we have a lot of work that's being done by folks like John Kawamoto and Virginia to help make this happen. If you'd like to participate in our media, social media, as well as the LTEs, feel free to get in touch with Virginia. And Virginia, maybe you can put the link to the web form. Also, Tamara in the chat indicated there's an LTE party tomorrow at 2 p.m. Hawaii time, and she's going to put the link in the chat. Thanks, Tamara. So national call highlights. I'm going to abbreviate this a little bit because I really want to get to our our action item or our hands-on activity that Paul is going to facilitate. So I would normally share a video here, a 5-minute video, but the essence of it is what's encapsulated here in the actions that every month there's a series of actions that we're encouraged to take. And for July, these are the actions, right? So summer activity, there's fundraising as well as tabling, and the different chapters here are involved in facilitating some of that. We want to share information about clean energy permitting reform. There's a link in here if someone can put that in the chat. That allows us to socialize and gain support for clean energy permitting. We need this to be able to ensure that we make the transition. There's a lot of clean energy generation in parts of the country, and demand is so far away. We need new transmission infrastructure, and it's quite difficult to make that happen. Writing, as we already talked about, practicing how to handle questions about clean energy permitting reform. And then, of course, this last point here, which I'll turn over to Paul, which is supporting the Prove It Act. And Paul, I'll have you take it away. Are you muted, maybe?
I think I need to be able to share my screen, yeah.
I want to stop sharing. Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, so for everybody gotten to listen to all of us, so here's your chance to take some action and get a little bit more involved. So there's a call from CCL to reach out to our senators to encourage them to co-sponsor the Prove It Act, which is basically a first step towards getting a carbon border adjustment. So the idea of this act is that it'll be a first step for the US to start assessing what its carbon emissions are from various industries. And a border carbon adjustment basically works by looking at the difference between two countries' emissions for a certain production process or producing a certain set of goods. So the US needs to know where it's, what its emissions are for various industries. So it can, if we can enact carbon pricing, it can properly assess a border carbon adjustment. And a primary reason for going for, or the support for a carbon border adjustment is, in general, the US industries are less carbon intensive than industries in other countries. So theoretically, this should be a bill that benefits US companies. And without a border carbon adjustment coupled with carbon pricing, US industries are going to start facing taxes or border adjustments from Canada and the European Union in the coming years as they're going forward with their border carbon adjustments. And we're only, CCL is only asking for to reach out to the senators because the bill right now resides in the Senate. There is no companion bill in the House. So I put the link in the chat. And if you click on that link, hopefully you get the page that you see on my screen right now. And so here, all you need to do is click email your members of Congress, put in your street address and your zip code so the application can figure out who your senators are. And then, so they know, your senators know who's writing to them. Put in your name, email address, phone, okay. And then what should happen is you should have your senators clicked here. And then all you need to do to send off an email to both of them is just hit the continue button and then hit send here. And you should have an email coming into your inbox that says you're successful in this activity. So I will stop sharing and happy to answer any questions if folks have them or having any difficulty getting to the site and, sending off the emails. And if everybody does this, we'll get it, our centers will get a nice flood of emails when they come in the office tomorrow morning. So thanks for playing along here.
So Paul, you took too long. It should have been like 1 minute just to complete the task.
Yeah, sorry. I
You're
talked
kind of
too much, I
losing
guess.
losing your touch. I'm kidding.
So I don't know if everybody's good, then I'll hand it back to you, Noel.
Yeah, so okay. Yeah, we're up on time here and want to honor your your evening. I know it's late for some of us. But if anyone would like to stay back, the leads are going to hang on for a few minutes to address any questions that you might have. I want to thank everyone for being here, for joining. I want to also thank our SCs, Ron, Paul, Molly, our regional coordinator, Tamara. Tamara is calling in from California and it's awfully late out there. So thanks for being a hero tonight. But thanks very much, everybody. This has been incredible. And again, for those of you who are new and would like to learn more about CCL, I put my email in the chat. Feel free to send me a note and I'll share with you information on how you can join and participate in this incredible community.
Can I just add, Ashley, happy to reach out to you. She's still on.
Were there other questions in the chat that we didn't address? Sorry, there was so much going on in the chat. Ashley raised something?
She said she's very interested in media. So, and then
okay.
I don't know if we have a
Yeah,
few minutes, Tom, if you want to go on with what you're talking about with the UBI and carbon cashback being a nice mechanism to help with that.
I could comment about that. My question was something else, if that's all right.
Oh, sure. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted, in addition to letting you folks know about that task force that might finally happen, that was originally when I first joined the Faith Action Climate Task Force, right, 3-4 years ago. And they were talking carbon cashback. My initial interest was based on my very long interest in universal basic income, which itself was a part of my almost 40-year interest in the past, present, and possible futures of economic democracy. And that was my doctoral dissertation subtopic. So it started back in the 80s and I've just gotten more obsessed with it since. So anyway, my comment, I just stumbled across an old post I made on Facebook. You guys might remember, I'm sure most of you know who Paul Hawken is, and you might remember his 2017 book, Drawdown. Yep. And I saw that again and I go, damn, this thing was, everybody was saying this is the best thing since sliced bread, right? Like he had all the answers, what everybody could do. We didn't need legislation to do all this stuff, right? But I hadn't even thought about it since then. And I was wondering what this group, what your awareness is of, did his ideas fall flat? Or are they actually people adopting them and putting them into practice? Or anybody got any thoughts about that?
Yeah, Thomas, just a comment. I think there is active support for doing what he's doing, all those 100 top priorities of
right.
Easy things that we know how to do, that we can do now.
Right.
I'd also like to comment that Paul has made it very clear that his top 100 items, wonderful as they are, do not extend to national legislative policies. And I think the reason for that is it's real hard for the drawdown scientists to really get a handle on what something like the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act will do when it's enacted. but in presentations that I've seen from Paul, he is a total 100% supporter of carbon pricing policy. He believes, number one, that it's an essential part of the mix, and number two, that it will act synergy as a synergy supporter of many of the 100 items. So I was real pleased to learn that a few years ago and hear him expand eloquently on his support for carbon fee and dividend.
Rod, it sounds like you might be personally acquainted with him, with Paul Hawken.
No, I've just read his book, seen his website, and followed some of his presentations.
Well, Paul Bernstein, how accurately can economists model the effects? I know you guys have some, right?
Yeah. Citizens Climate Lobby back in 2016, 2017, contracted with a group called Regional Economic Modeling Incorporated, REMI for short. And REMI spent a year or more doing a national study that was kind of granular. They looked at communities and states and then compiled them all together into a national overview. And the REMI study is probably as valid now as it was then. And it's on a CCL webpage. If you go to cclusa.org and just scroll down to the bottom of the homepage, you will find the REMI study there. And it's a good resource.
And
yeah,
it seems like
I worked with REMI as well over 15 years ago, so I could vouch for their models.
Okay. It seems like it was about, what, 5 to 8 years ago that it was getting headlines nationally because several high-level old-school Republicans were in favor of it, right? But I suspect Trump and MAGA land has, like, everything's on a back burner. They suck all the oxygen out of the room all the time, right? With all their nonsense. So nothing happens, I guess.
I want to call attention.
Is there another explanation? That's the obvious one to me, but maybe I'm wrong.
So I did put a link to Paul Hawken. He was at one of the events here in Honolulu, and I put the link in the chat. At about the 30-minute mark, he responds to a question from somebody about carbon pricing. So you can hear it directly from him.
How long ago was that, Noel? When did that?
This was last year, October.
Oh, he was here last year?
Yep.
Damn.
Well, he actually he joined via video.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, folks, we are. This is an optional piece. Don't feel obliged to stay on. If you must leave, feel free to drop off. We'll stay on for another few minutes if there are any other questions that we might address for you. And Ashley, I put a link to the web form for the sign-up sheet. So feel free to join us there.
Could I thank Ashley? I'd like to thank Ashley also for taking some awesome notes in our lobby meetings. She was one of those people on Zoom. And
wonderful.
Yeah, just hopped right in out of nowhere. So welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah,
That
thank
fast
you,
words
Ash.
per minute is helpful.
Well, yep, go ahead. Sorry.
I don't know if anyone's here from Maui, but it kind of seems like the Office of Sustainability on Maui. I don't know if it's still a thing. I don't know if anybody had info on that, but I could follow up with Doug.
Yeah, check with Doug. He would know, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
All the people that were in it have moved on. So I was doing some Googling.
And I think it's one of the things that Heather did not mention was that it was important for this office to be created in a way that would allow it to be durable, right? It would resist, or it would transcend administrations, right?
Yeah.
So I think that strategy is really critical, and I think we've seen the consequences if you don't do it right based on what's happened in Maui. I kind of heard but it kind of dissipated with a leadership change, but you can confirm.
That's what I thought, so.
Yeah. Okay, Tamara, did you have anything to share? Anything you'd like, guidance from a leadership standpoint before we wrap up? You're muted.
Hello, everybody. Try that again. Hello, everybody. I think the two things that I might add is I just want to remind people to log any action that you're taking, whether that's a letter, even if you start a letter and it doesn't get published, if you submit it, anytime that you use the letter writing tool on CCL Community or on the website, the Take Action tool that you may have used tonight, that's all automatically logged. But anything else, like even attending tonight's meeting, and part of the reason that I encourage this is because I've recently discovered that people who are not active, like the way that we assess engagement in CCL is through the activity tracker, the action tracker. Mm-hmm. And so people who may be taking action but aren't logging them are considered unengaged. And that's not a problem, except for the fact that that those people aren't emailed. They're not invited to our conferences, for example. So I just want to remind people, encourage people, cclusa.org/action tracker is a great link to have at the ready. And then the other thing I'll say is I know that I assume that many, if not all of you, live in Hawaii, and that coming to climate camp in October on the mainland in Oregon would probably be way too much carbon than it's worth. But if you know anybody on the mainland, on the West Coast, anybody is welcome to come. Basically, climate camp is a workshop retreat that focuses on joy and resilience and integrating meaningful action into our lives. And climate change, as we all know, very heavy topic. And so we created this workshop as a way to really help us deepen our resilience and integrate more joy and play and into our lives in a way that helps us take more meaningful action. So if you know anybody that might be interested, we have a website. I can drop it into the chat when I'm not talking because I'm on my phone in my kitchen. But anyway, we'd love to have any of you or any of the people that you know in your lives, and it is open to people who are not part of CCL. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk, and it's I really, really appreciate all the work that each of you is doing.
Thanks, Tamara. Great. So we'll wait for you to put that in the chat, and then we'll wrap up. Okay. I'm sorry. Tom has his hand up.
Yeah, I just noticed in chat, Ashley Boggs, who's no longer online. She said she was super interested in UBI. So I just found.
Oh, she's still.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm still.
Oh, my bad. Your name kind of is hard to see because of the bright light behind you. Anyway, yeah. When I find out more, I just was found out by the primary legislative sponsor of that reso 6 years ago that it's finally going to happen, and that's all I know. And he said sometime in the next few months, and I told him he already knew about my interest in it. He knows that I don't want to say I'm an expert, but I probably know as much about it as anybody in Hawaii. There's probably somebody out there who knows more, but I don't know. I don't know who they are. But anyway, so I'm gonna get in touch with him so I can be made apprised of when they form a task force, when they have public meetings, and at that point, if I learn more and I can share it with you guys and everybody else I know who's interested, I will do that. Right. Thank you. Yeah.
Great, Thomas. Thank you.
I would say later this year at the earliest. Just a guess.
Great. So, Ron, do you want to wrap us up with a song?
Yeah, with a song.
Tony Bennett, maybe?
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? You know, I just got reacquainted via Facebook with one of the early Hawaii Island chapter founders, a lady by the name of Amy Stokes. And Amy was with Zoe and me and a few others. And she said, I asked her, I said, hey, do you remember me and our work together with Citizens Climate Lobby? And she wrote back and said, absolutely. When we moved back to South Carolina, she said, you sang us a CCL song on your ukulele. And I go, oh, shoots. I wished I'd have written that down because I've totally forgotten what it was. Noel, thank you for asking. If I can delve back in the history of my gray matter, I'll try to pull up a song again. So anyway, thanks so much for everybody for being on the meeting tonight. And it was a great meeting, learned a lot. And as Drew Jones of oh, what's that name? Say again.
Is it Climate Interactive?
Yeah, Climate Interactive and the En-ROADS model likes to finish his meetings with exhortation, go get them. So
And
thank you
Hawaii has
all
to
and
do
good
it.
night. And if you
Thanks,
want to
Chip.
save the chat, there's 3 dots down the bottom.
Yep.
And
Good
it
to see you,
allows.
Chip.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, good to see you, Molly.
Good to
Good
see you
night.
all.
Good evening.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Take care.
Oh, yeah.